Ever wonder what really goes down at Diddy's super secretive white parties? You know, the kind of extravagant events where, oddly enough, even kids show up. Or what about Jay-Z's private gatherings, where he once stabbed someone and somehow walked away without facing any charges? These are just a few of the crazy stories behind some of the rap game's most exclusive parties. These events aren't just about partying. They're where big deals get made, alliances are formed, and wild stuff happens that you wouldn't believe. Before we dive into how all this goes down, these exclusive parties became the center of chaos and control. Let's dive into some of the most secretive ones thrown by rappers. Diddy's all-white parties from 1998 to 2009 were the definition of exclusivity. They weren't just your average celebrity hangouts, they were major cultural events. Held in places like the Hamptons or Beverly Hills, they were filled with luxury and packed with the biggest stars. When you think of a legendary party, Diddy's white parties are what come to mind. Think about the biggest names: Puff, Jay-Z, Beyoncé, Mariah, Paris Hilton. If you had clout, you were there. But while everything seemed all glitz and glamour, the real stories told a different tale. The main rule? No cameras, no media. Whatever happened inside stayed behind those mansion doors. That secrecy wasn't just about protecting privacy, it made the parties even more exclusive. Inside, the A-listers mingled, networked, and let loose without worrying about anyone watching. But the real story was in the after-parties, where the glam faded into something much darker. Those who stayed weren't getting the polished version of Diddy's events anymore. Allegations suggest these late-night gatherings pushed boundaries, leaving some guests questioning what they'd gotten themselves into. Now, with the FBI looking into these parties, people are starting to wonder if all that secrecy wasn't just about privacy. It might have been about hiding things no one wanted out in the open. Diddy's white parties were all about control. Every detail was planned out, from the vibe in the room to the tightly secured doors. But now, years later, that secrecy is starting to look suspicious. There's a point in these parties when everything changes. Kids are told they've got about an hour left to enjoy the fun before it's time to leave, because after that, things take a turn. And when they get older, they definitely wouldn't want to be part of what happens next. Allegations tied to these events paint a much darker picture: manipulation, exploitation, and abuse. Nothing like the glamorous, carefree image people saw on the outside. The parties once sold to the world as glamorous and exclusive started raising red flags long before the rumors hit. Neighbors began noticing things that didn't add up. Women leaving the events looking disoriented, stumbling with their clothes messed up. Some were even seen wandering around, with their underwear exposed, which was a huge contrast to the polished image Diddy was known for. This made people start asking what was really going on behind those closed doors. And then there were the claims about the drinks. Witnesses and survivors have stepped forward, saying, "The parties once sold to the world as glamorous and exclusive started raising red flags long before the rumors hit." Neighbors began noticing things that didn't add up. Women leaving the events looking disoriented, stumbling with their clothes messed up. Some were even seen wandering around, with their underwear exposed, which was a huge contrast to the polished image Diddy was known for. This made people start asking what was really going on behind those closed doors. And then there were the claims about the drinks. Witnesses and survivors have stepped forward, saying, "Survivors and witnesses have claimed the drinks weren't just spiked with alcohol, they were laced with drugs like GHB, ecstasy, and cocaine. These aren't just typical party drugs, they're substances that take away a person's ability to consent, leaving them vulnerable to whatever happens next." For those who don't know what happens at a Diddy party, these are the kinds of things some people are saying. The allegations suggest it wasn't an accident, but something intentional, creating an environment where exploitation could happen freely. Thrive It did. According to the accounts, these parties reportedly stretched on for days, spiraling into what can only be described as nightmare scenarios. Orgies involving sex workers and high-profile guests were allegedly commonplace, with drugs fueling the entire ordeal. But it wasn't just about sex. Accounts include an ES of physical violence and degradation that turned these gatherings into something far more sinister. Perhaps the most unsettling part of these allegations is the role Diddy's inner circle is said to have played. These weren't just friends or colleagues and joined the party. They were allegedly part of a system designed to exploit women, were reportedly trapped, mistreated, and filmed. Even more disturbing, the footage wasn't kept private. Claims suggest it was sold, turning those horrifying moments into profit. It's calculated, it's cruel, and it paints a picture that's hard to process. These weren't the kind of parties you just stumbled into. They were locked down, secretive, and tightly controlled. Phones were confiscated at the door, cutting off. The parties once sold to the world as glamorous and exclusive started raising red flags long before the rumors hit. Neighbors began noticing things that didn't add up. Women leaving the events looking disoriented, stumbling with their clothes messed up. Some were even seen wandering around, with their underwear exposed, which was a huge contrast to the polished image Diddy was known for. This made people start asking what was really going on behind those closed doors. And then there were the claims about the drinks. Witnesses and survivors have stepped forward, saying, "The parties once sold to the world as glamorous and exclusive started raising red flags long before the rumors hit." Neighbors began noticing things that didn't add up. Women leaving the events looking disoriented, stumbling with their clothes messed up. Some were even seen wandering around, with their underwear exposed, which was a huge contrast to the polished image Diddy was known for. This made people start asking what was really going on behind those closed doors. And then there were the claims about the drinks. Witnesses and survivors have stepped forward, saying, "Survivors and witnesses have claimed the drinks weren't just spiked with alcohol, they were laced with drugs like GHB, ecstasy, and cocaine. These aren't just typical party drugs, they're substances that take away a person's ability to consent, leaving them vulnerable to whatever happens next." For those who don't know what happens at a Diddy party, these are the kinds of things some people are saying. The allegations suggest it wasn't an accident, but something intentional, creating an environment where exploitation could happen freely. Thrive It did. According to the accounts, these parties reportedly stretched on for days, spiraling into what can only be described as nightmare scenarios. Orgies involving sex workers and high-profile guests were allegedly commonplace, with drugs fueling the entire ordeal. But it wasn't just about sex. Accounts include an ES of physical violence and degradation that turned these gatherings into something far more sinister. Perhaps the most unsettling part of these allegations is the role Diddy's inner circle is said to have played. These weren't just friends or colleagues and joined the party. They were allegedly part of a system designed to exploit women, were reportedly trapped, mistreated, and filmed. Even more disturbing, the footage wasn't kept private. Claims suggest it was sold, turning those horrifying moments into profit. It's calculated, it's cruel, and it paints a picture that's hard to process. These weren't the kind of parties you just stumbled into. They were locked down, secretive, and tightly controlled. Phones were confiscated at the door, cutting off any chance of evidence escaping the venue. The no phones policy wasn't just about protecting celebrity images, it seemed like it was there to hide the darker truths of what was really happening. One story that stands out comes from Talia Graves, who filed a lawsuit in 2024. Graves said that back in 2001, Diddy and his bodyguard Joseph "Big Joe" Sherman lured her to a party at Daddy's house recording studio. The invite came under the pretense of discussing her boyfriend's performance at Bad Boy Records, but once their things allegedly took a horrifying turn. Graves claimed she was drugged and later woke up bound, her hands tied behind her back with what felt like plastic bags. She tried to fight back, but was slammed headfirst into a table. The next thing she remembers is waking up alone on a couch in pain, bruised, and unable to piece together everything that had happened. What makes Graves' account even more disturbing is what she learned years later. Her boyfriend at the time revealed that Diddy and Sherman had filmed the entire thing. According to her lawsuit, this wasn't just a video passed around the inner circle, it was reportedly sold as pornographic material. Graves says this wasn't a one-off incident, but part of a larger pattern where Diddy and his crew would record and profit off non-consensual acts. Her allegations line up with several other lawsuits detailing eerily similar stories. One woman reported being drugged at a party only to wake up bruised, disoriented, and with no memory of what had happened. In another lawsuit, Crystal McKenney shared how she was drugged at a 2003 event and later coerced into sexual acts like Avis. McKen alleged that Diddy filmed her and distributed the footage without her consent. April Lamprose, another accuser, said Diddy recorded her back in 1997 and later showed the tape to others as a way to humiliate, and assert control over her. These aren't isolated incidents, they paint a chilling picture of a pattern of exploitation under the guise of glamour and exclusivity. What made these events possible was the strict control Diddy and his associates maintained over these parties. Phones were confiscated, security was tight, and the atmosphere was carefully curated to ensure no EV evidence could lead. Victims often felt powerless to come forward, fearing retaliation or public humiliation from the release of tapes. In her November 2023 lawsuit, Cassie Ventura shared stories about these secretive gatherings. She alleged that she was coerced into sexual acts during these events, where powerful people used the party atmosphere as a smokescreen for abuse. In her September 2024 lawsuit, singer Dawn Richard revealed that she was both a victim and a witness at Diddy's parties. She described being emotionally and physically mistreated and witnessing similar treatment of others. Richard claimed that during these gatherings, Diddy's control extended far beyond the music business, turning party spaces into places where people were forced into situations they couldn't escape. Another lawsuit filed in September 2024 by a Florida model detailed her experience at one of Diddy's notorious gatherings. One woman claimed her drink was spiked, and the next thing she knew, she was waking up bruised and disoriented. Later, she found out she was pregnant and alleged that Diddy's girlfriend at the time, rapper Young Miami, pressured her into having an abortion. Attorney Tony Busby has since filed lawsuits for multiple unnamed victims, many of whom shared terrifying stories about what went down at these parties. Tests found strange drugs in their systems, substances most people have never even heard of. One name that keeps coming up is a drug called Exene, which, based on our research, is known as a horse tranquilizer. Among the 120 potential cases, some victims were minors at the time of the alleged incidents. These accounts share common themes: drug drinks, Virion, and high-profile attendees abusing their power. What makes the allegations even more chilling is the systematic nature described in these filings. The secrecy and exclusivity weren't just about maintaining a high-profile image, they were allegedly about ensuring that no evidence left the venue and no victims could speak out without facing backlash or threats. Both Diddy and Kanye used their parties to show power, but their worlds overlapped as allegations of abuse tied their names together. Kanye West Wyoming Ranch gatherings. Kanye West parties are always something else. Half art show, half elite social club. His events feel like a direct invitation into his world full of control, mystery, and that over-the-top extravagance he's known for. But beneath all that curated glamour, some unsettling stories have started to come out. Take his album release party back in May 2018. He threw it at this remote Wyoming ranch surrounded by mountains and wild horses. Celebs, industry insiders, and influencers were flown in for what was sold as this intimate artistic experience. Bonfires, marshmallows, Kanye's new music. It was all set up to feel like something magical, but for some, the secrecy of Kanye's events goes deeper than protecting his art. Singer-songwriter Nikki Heaton shared her story about one of Kanye's secret gatherings during an Instagram Live in 2024. She said it happened when she was 19 and had just dropped her track Bad Intentions. Getting invited to a recording studio by Kanye seemed like the perfect shot to connect with big industry names, but according to her, the vibe shifted as soon as she arrived. Kanye and Diddy, both clearly intoxicated, and things only got worse from there. When offered a drink, Heaton's instincts kicked in. Sensing something wasn't right, she pretended to sip, avoiding what she believed was a tainted beverage. That move may have been her first line of defense in what would become a harrowing experience as the night went on. The other women in the studio started leaving. Even Heaton's manager stepped out, leaving her alone with Diddy, Kanye, and a few of their associates. The mood shifted quickly from uncomfortable to outright threatening. The men began pressuring her to take off her clothes, claiming it was so hot in the studio. At first, Heaton tried to deflect, protesting, but the situation escalated. She alleged that Diddy and Kanye became physical, ripping her shirt off and leaving her almost fully exposed. The sense of helplessness in that moment was overwhelming. Heaton described the moment as unforgettable. During her Instagram Live, she explained that she looked to one of the other men in the room for help, silently mouthing the word help, but he turned away. That moment, according to Heaton, solidified her fear that no one would come to her rescue that night. That's not what haunts me, it's this. It says, these two grown men were pawing at me, trying to take my clothes off. I look over to this man asking for help, and she mouthed the word help, but when their eyes met, he just looked away, leaving her to fend for herself. Running on pure adrenaline, Heaton made her move. She lunged forward, catching her attackers off guard just long enough to break free and bolt for the exit. Once she got out, she hid in another studio, shaking and terrified for 25 minutes before finally managing to call her manager and get an Uber to escape. Her story paints a disturbing picture of a world built on power and secrecy, where Kanye and his crew allegedly used their influence to exploit and silence. Kanye's parties might look glamorous from the outside, but they all seem to follow the same playbook. Total lockdown. Phones are reportedly snatched at the door, cutting guests off from the outside world. That no evidence policy ensures whatever goes down inside stays under wraps, leaving attendees exposed and without any backup. Then there's the Vegas listening party for vultures, which took things to another level entirely, and not in a good way. What started as another high-energy Kanye event quickly spiraled into chaos, turning into one of his most controversial moments. It kicked off like any Kanye party, hyped to the max with just enough mystery to keep people guessing. He announced it on social media, teasing a Ravik vibe in some random warehouse on the outskirts of Vegas. Tickets were a jaw-dropping $2,000 each, and fans were shelling out in advance with zero clarity on refunds. By the time the crowd showed up, the energy was buzzing. It was Kanye. After all, you never knew what was coming, and then it came somewhere. In the middle of the night, Kanye grabbed the mic and went off on one of his signature rants. At first, it seemed like just another venting session, calling out former business partners for betrayal and greed. But then, things took a darker turn. He started making anti-Semitic remarks, claiming that Jewish people control most of the hospitals, schools, and businesses in LA. The statement was not only baseless, but deeply offensive, leaving many in the crowd stunned. Some attendees immediately pushed back, but Kanye wasn't trying to hear it. When someone in the crowd shouted, "You're not God," Kanye lost it. He fired back, threatening to have them thrown out right then and there. But instead of letting it go, he kept going. In the same rant, he casually compared himself to both Adolf Hitler and Jesus Christ, like it was no big deal. Anytime someone tried to push back, he just shouted them down, making the whole scene even more uncomfortable. That was the final straw. Adidas, his longtime partner, cut ties, and other brands followed, not wanting any part of the fallout. What started as another Kanye moment quickly turned into a full-blown disaster. When someone in the crowd shouted, "You're not God," Kanye lost it. He fired back, threatening to have them thrown out right then and there. But instead of letting it go, he kept going. In the same rant, he casually compared himself to both Adolf Hitler and Jesus Christ, like it was no big deal. Anytime someone tried to push back, he just shouted them down, making the whole scene even more uncomfortable. That was the final straw. Adidas, his longtime partner, cut ties, and other brands followed, not wanting any part of the fallout. What started as another Kanye moment quickly turned into a full-blown disaster. Into a mess. Las Vegas police showed up to shut the party down because it wasn't even licensed. The promoter got hit with a citation in the crowd, who had dropped thousands of dollars on tickets, got kicked out into the night, and just when you thought it couldn't get messier, more details about Kanye's secret party started to emerge. Former Yeezy chief of staff Lauren Pichette stepped forward, dropping bombshells about what really goes down behind the scenes. In her lawsuit, she described how Kanye turned his Yeezy offices into a sexual playground, with his wife Bianca Sari allegedly playing the role of an orgy coordinator. Pisa's lawsuit alleges that Kanye frequently turned office spaces into makeshift bedrooms, setting up mattresses, blankets, and pillows in private rooms or even closets. These spaces, she claimed, were used for what Kanye referred to as his sex parties. The allegations go further, stating that Bianca Sori, far from being just a bystander, was actively involved in coordinating these events, allegedly serving as an orchestrator of Kanye's so-called fantasies. Pata's account gets even more unsettling when she describes Kanye's behavior at these parties. She alleged that Kanye often tried to expose her to these events, creating situations where she felt trapped or manipulated. According to the lawsuit, Kanye's actions were calculated to make her feel powerless, and Bianca, who she claimed was unfazed by his behavior, reportedly enabled much of it. One particularly disturbing claim involves an incident where Kanye allegedly grabbed Pacoda by The throat during a party with Bianca present. Pishit described how Bianca stood nearby showing no reaction, as if it were just another part of their dynamic. In her lawsuit, Pakoda alleged that Bianca was not only used to Kanye's behavior, but actively participated in some of it. Alleged Ly taking part in what Peacock called twisted and bizarre sexual behavior that mirrored Kanye's public and private persona. Kanye West's parties and video shoots have always carried a layer of controversy, and model Jennifer Ann's lawsuit adds another unsettling story to the mix. She alleges that Kanye mistreated her during the 2010 shoot for Laro In for the Kill video. According to Ann, things went off the rails quickly. Kanye, surrounded by his team and his then-girlfriend Victoria's Secret model Salida Ebanks, allegedly set a tone of unchecked behavior. It started with Kanye casually dismissing her as the Asian girl, a comment she says felt dehumanizing and racist, but it didn't stop there. In the middle of filming, and says Kanye declared that it was art and that he was like Picasso before choking her in front of his team. She alleges that he then rammed his fingers into her mouth, forcing her to gag, repeatedly simulating an act of forced oral. All of this, she claims, happened while cameras rolled with his team standing by and doing nothing to stop it. Even more chilling was the presence of Ebanks, who Ann says saw what was happening but turned away instead of stepping in. That lack of intervention from both Ebanks and Kanye's team left Ann feeling powerless and alone. The lawsuit doesn't just target Kanye, it also calls out Universal Music Group for failing to oversee or address the situation. While Kanye is known to stir controversy, Drake has kept things relatively quiet in his OVO fortress, surrounded by his own private security. Detailed Drake's OVO mansion parties. Drake's sprawling Toronto mansion, known as the Embassy, is at the center of countless local horror stories about what allegedly goes down behind those high-security gates. Neighbors and locals have whispered about the dark side of Drake's lavish parties, painting a picture that's far from the glamorous after parties we see on Instagram. Instead, the story suggests a scene that's more Bad Boy Records office party chaos than just another night of champagne toast and hit records on repeat. Living just a few blocks away from the Embassy means you get a front row seat to the constant buzz surrounding the property. Drake's OVO team is always on the move, rolling deep in convoys with high-profile security patrol ing the area. The sheer scale of the operation feels less like a celebrity keeping a low profile of exclusivity that keeps the public fascinated, but CYP's allegations paint a starkly different picture, one of unchecked power dynamics and a culture of impunity among the rich and famous. While Drake's team continues to deny the accusations, the case serves as a reminder that not everything about the glamorous world of celebrity party is as pristine as it seems. Drake's name has been tied to countless headlines over the years, but one of the more controversial stories revolves around his settlement with Laquana Morris, also known as Leah Lace. In 2017, Morris accused Drake of misconduct and later claimed he had impregnated her at an after-party following his Manchester concert. The fallout from those allegations saw Drake shelling out a reported $350,000 in a settlement. What began as an encounter between the rapper and the aspiring model turned into a legal battle months later. Morris alleged that after spending time together, Drake forced himself on her and impregnated her. These claims surfaced publicly when she went on a media spree, painting the rapper in a damning light. In court documents, Drake admitted to having consensual sex with Morris that night, but denied any allegations of wrongdoing. Things escalated when Morris reportedly booked a flight to see Drake after their encounter, only to cancel it when he didn't respond. According to Drake's lawsuit, her frustration over the lack of communication seemed to fuel her accusations, which he alleged were part of a plot to extract money from him. Morris later claimed Drake had impregnated her, but the situation took an even stranger turn when, according to Drake's team, she refused to take a paternity test. The Manchester police were eventually involved and Drake was cleared of any wrongdoing, but the damage to his reputation had already been done. Morris didn't stop there. She took her accusations further, leading Drake to file his own countersuit against her for civil extortion, fraud, emotional distress, defamation, and abuse of process. By November 2018, the situation reached a boiling point and Drake's legal team negotiated a settlement with Morris. Reports indicate that the agreement included a payment of $350,000, along with a stipulation that Morris could no longer repeat her allegations against the rapper. In a surprising twist, Morris later filed a complaint against her own attorney claiming that the settlement portrayed Drake as the victim and did not adequately represent her interests. She accused her legal team of working with Drake's lawyers to her detriment, a move that reignited the controversy surrounding the case. While no raid or official investigation has ever disrupted the tight operation at the embassy, speculation about what could happen if the law ever comes knock has people talking. For some, the idea of seeing the police break through Drake's layers of security feels like something straight out of a movie, but for others, it's just another chapter in a story of power, influence, and the lengths celebrities go to keep their private lives under wraps. Drake's neighbors aren't the only ones with stories to tell, whether you're walking past the embassy or scrolling through social media. The divide is clear. There's the public persona of Drake, the global superstar, and then there's the shadowy whispers of what happens when the cameras are off and the gates close. But Jay-Z's Gold Party took Hollywood's secret parties to another level as the rapper collaborated with his wife to cover up the shocking things going down. Jay-Z's Gold post-Oscars parties. Jay-Z and Beyoncé's annual Gold Party isn't just a party, it's a flex. Forget Vanity Fair or any other Oscars after party. If you're